So here we have a climate graph for the Tundra region. As you can see along the bottom, we have our x-axis, we have our climate graph divided into 12 different partitions right from January through to December. And then we have on our y-axis, on the left hand side, you can see we have temperature. Now temperature is always plotted as a line graph, continuous data there in a line, and then on the right hand side you can see that we have precipitation, and precipitation is always drawn as a bar chart. The way I like to remember it is if you were up in science and you were asked to measure out a volume of liquid, you'd of course use a measuring cylinder. So I like to say each of these bars here as their own individual measuring cylinders for the tundra region. So that is my climate graph. And what we need to be able to do is to describe in detail the climate of the tundra. And that would usually come with a reference diagram. So we're going to assume that this is your reference diagram. And we'll go about starting to add to that. And there's a certain template and guide to describing climate graphs that I'm going to show you just now. You can see the handwriting isn't too great. I hope you'll forgive me for that. But at the very start, I have this summary statement that I will be looking to fill in. It says the climate in Barrow is something and something. So this is just a general observation. If I were to look back here, I can see when my highest temperature isn't that far above freezing and I don't have much precipitation, that I can pretty much surmise that my climate is very cold and dry. So there we go. Climate in Barrow is cold and dry, and straight away I would be getting a mark for that statement. Now what I need to do is go on and build a little bit of detail into my answer. So I've got the bare foundations there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have one paragraph that tells me all about temperature. Remember, temperature is that line graph, and then separately I'm going to have a second paragraph all about precipitation. So I'm looking here, the maximum temperature is X, occurring in X. Okay, so what I need to go down, maximum temperature, I need to remind myself that temperature are these line graphs, and I'm looking, okay, my highest temperature, and I'll draw a line straight down there, and I can see that my highest temperature is in July. When I'm reading it across the way, I should be using a ruler, but I've done what I can there. So you can see July is the warmest month. Don't know if you would call it warm when it's sitting between 0 and 10 degrees. That little mark there would be 5 degrees. You can see I'm just above that. So what I would say is that my temperature in the warmest month in July is 6 degrees Celsius. Yeah, just checking back here. Double checking, it's always a good thing to do. July and 6 degrees Celsius. So there we go, 6. Now what have I not done? I've not put in my degrees Celsius, so I'm just going to do that freehand like that. So the maximum temperature is 6 degrees Celsius occurring in July, and then we go on, new sentence, the minimum temperature is, what is it and in what month? So let's go back, let's look at my line. Where do I have the lowest X? Well, December's looking pretty low, but it's not the lowest figure. You can see that January very much is the lowest figure there. If I'm to read that across, I can see it's between -20 and -30. It's just below the -25 mark in there. So really, if it's just below that, that actually means that it's -26 degrees Celsius. -26 is just a little bit chilly, folks. You think about your fridge is 4 degrees, and that keeps things pretty cold. Imagine being outside -26 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to pop that in just now. And yet again, I don't have my unit in here. -26 should be, there we go. Got my degrees Celsius in there in January. Last thing I'm going to do with temperature is going to work out the range. Now that's exactly the same as how you would work it out in mathematics. We're looking for the difference between the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature. So we need to be really careful here because the minimum is -26. So we take our -26 up to 0, it's 26 degrees, and then our highest temperature, remember, is above 6. So our actual range in temperature is not 26 degrees, but is in fact 32 degrees Celsius. So there we go, and now we're just going to start talking about precipitation, and we're going to do exactly the same. I've set up here that it is dry. Now I need to evidence that, and I do so again by talking about the highest and the lowest amounts of precipitation and when they fall. So going back to my climate graph, remember at this point I'm looking to look at my bars, so I'm just going to rub all of this out here, and now I'm looking at my bar chart, and I can see quite clearly here that August is the greatest precipitation, and if I were to read that across, roughly at 60 millimetres of precipitation, so I'll just fill that in here before then looking at when the lowest precipitation is and what that is. So I'll do that now. So there we go, greatest precipitation falls in August with 60 millimetres, while the lowest, if I were to look back here, as you hopefully can see, is in December. Not much precipitation there, 24 millimetres. Now what we do is we don't work out the range in precipitation. That's not really of any great value at all. What we do is we work out the total annual precipitation. So annual means for the year, which means adding up January right through to December. Now you're just going to have to believe me when I fill this in here that our annual precipitation is approximately 240 millimetres. This isn't a great deal of precipitation for a region. If you think about a Coke can is 330 millimetres of precipitation, so we're talking about on average each area of Barrow in Alaska only receiving 240 millimetres of precipitation, and that is less than 250. Now why am I saying less than 250? Because that is the amount of precipitation globally. If you receive less than that, you're considered a desert. So our tundra regions are deserts. They're obviously not hot deserts, they are cold deserts. Remember, deserts, just one S in the middle, not two. I'm not talking about ice cream, although it wouldn't be a bad place to keep it. So that is our description of both our temperature and our precipitation. If I were to go back as an SQA marker, okay, I've given my greatest precipitation, the amount and the month. Some markers might actually give you a mark in there. I like to have both the highest and the lowest and evidence in it with the months and the figures, so I'm going to give a mark there. And because I've gone the length of the total annual precipitation of 240 millimetres, I'm also going to put that in there. So quite clearly we've picked up at least about 5 marks there. Now if you had done all of this, it's good practice to try and add as much detail as possible into your answer, but there's also some places that we could have got marks but we haven't gone the length of describing, and that's okay. If I were to look at a tundra, this is the one location that we can kind of look at this. We won't talk about this in the equatorial or tropical rainforest, but what we can do is we can actually see how many months are above freezing point. So I haven't drawn my line incredibly well there. As you can see, my fingers is just drawn the line a little bit inaccurately, but there are 2 months above freezing point on this graph in Barrow, Alaska, and that's when most of the vegetation will be doing their growing. So that is our climate graph. You should now be able to draw one and hopefully be able to describe in detail one. You will now have your opportunity to do this. Please make sure to follow this guide and to send that into your teachers as soon as possible so that they can give you some feedback on your tundra description before we set you off in our tropical rainforest climate graphs. And this is the end of video 1.